The World Cup used to be simple, not easy, never easy, but simple. You had the group stage, you had the round of 16, you had the quarterfinals, semifinals, final, clean, familiar, almost elegant. But in 2026, football looked at that structure and said, what if we made everything bigger and also slightly confusing? And now here we are, 48 teams, 12 groups, a giant third place table, a brand new round of 32, more matches, more countries, more dreams, more chances for chaos. And the funny thing is, this format does not just change how many teams play. It changes how the whole tournament feels. Because now, the World Cup is not just about being great. Sometimes, it is about surviving. A team can finish third in its group and still be alive. A favorite can start badly and still escape. A small nation can lose a match, draw another, win one at the right moment, and suddenly find itself in the knockout stage of the biggest tournament on Earth. That sounds exciting. It also sounds completely insane. Because for decades, the World Cup group stage had a brutal beauty to it. You knew the deal. Finish top two or go home. No long calculations. No waiting for 5 other groups. No fans sitting there thinking, okay, if this team draws, that team loses by 2, and this other match does not end 3-1, then maybe we survive. Now, welcome to World Cup mathematics. And nothing kills the illusion of a simple sport faster than millions of fans suddenly becoming accountants. But this is exactly what makes the new format so interesting. It creates hope in places where hope used to die early. In the old World Cup, a bad opening game could almost destroy a team's tournament. Lose the first match, and the pressure became enormous. Lose badly, and the whole country started calculating goal difference like it was a national emergency. Now, the margin for survival is wider. That can be beautiful. It means more countries stay involved for longer. More fans get one more night to believe. More teams play their final group match with something still on the line. For smaller nations, this matters a lot. Because for some teams, just reaching the knockout stage is not a small detail. It is history. It is the kind of moment that children remember, that streets celebrate, that changes how a football nation sees itself. But here is the problem. When you make survival easier, do you also make excellence less important? That is the debate hiding underneath this whole format. Because if a team can finish third and still advance, the group stage becomes less like a clean test and more like a messy escape room. Before, winning the group felt powerful. Now, winning the group still matters, of course, but it also throws you into a massive bracket where the path can feel strange, uneven, and unpredictable. And sometimes the reward for being good is not as clear as fans expect. That is where the chaos begins. Because with 12 groups feeding into a 32-team knockout round, the bracket is no longer the familiar shape people grew up with. It feels bigger, heavier, almost like a second tournament starts before the real tournament starts. The third place race is the perfect example. On paper, it is brilliant. 12 teams finish third, 8 survive, 4 go home. That creates suspense across multiple groups. It keeps more matches alive. It stops the tournament from becoming dead too early. But emotionally, it is weird. Because a team can finish third, walk off the pitch not knowing if it has qualified, and then wait for other matches to decide its fate. Imagine that. You played your group. You did your job, maybe badly, maybe just well enough. And now your World Cup depends on strangers in another stadium. That is dramatic. It is also slightly cruel. And maybe that cruelty is good television. Football fans say they want fairness, but let's be honest, they also love chaos, they love the arguments, they love the strange scenarios, they love saying this format is ridiculous while watching every second of it. That is the genius and the madness of 2026. The format gives everyone something to complain about, which means everyone keeps paying attention. Favorites complain because the bracket feels strange. Smaller nations celebrate because they have more room to dream. Neutral fans get more stories. Commentators get more drama. And the internet gets endless arguments about whether this is the best or worst thing that ever happened to the World Cup. And here is where it gets even more interesting. The new format may actually change how teams play. In a smaller format, every group match feels like a knife fight. You know, the top two go through, the line is clear, so teams often need to chase wins quickly. But with 8 third-place teams advancing, strategy becomes more complicated. Is a draw good enough? Is losing by 1 acceptable? Should a team protect goal difference instead of chasing a risky late winner? Should a favorite rest players earlier because the path to survival is softer? These questions are not small. They shape matches, they shape decisions, they shape the way managers think. For smaller nations, the new format can feel like the door finally opened a little wider. In the old system, one bad day could almost end everything. You could arrive at the World Cup, face one giant immediately, lose heavily, and spend the next 2 matches trying to repair a broken tournament. Now, there is more room to breathe. One win can change everything, one draw can matter. One narrow defeat may not be the end. A team that would have been eliminated in another era can still wake up the next morning with a path, a calculation, a chance. And that is powerful. Because the World Cup is not only about who lifts the trophy, it is also about who gets remembered. A small nation making the knockout stage can become one of the stories of the tournament. It can create a national holiday kind of feeling. It can turn unknown players into heroes. It can make the world pay attention for one more match. And this is where the new format becomes hard to criticize completely. Yes, it is messy. Yes, it is strange. Yes, it can feel overloaded. But it gives more football nations a real reason to dream. The question is whether that dream comes at the cost of the tournament's old sharpness. The round of 32 is strange because it looks like the knockout stage, but emotionally it does not feel like the old knockout stage yet. In the past, when the round of 16 arrived, everyone understood the mood. Every match felt huge. Every team left was one of the final 16. There was a natural intensity to it. Now, with 32 teams still alive, the tournament breathes differently. Some games feel like classic knockout battles. Others feel like an extra survival round. Some teams look like true contenders. Others feel like they have already won just by being there, and that creates a weird question. Is this more dramatic or just more crowded? Because more football sounds great until you realize more football also means more uneven matches, more complicated routes, and more time before the tournament reaches that old, sharp feeling of only giants remain. But maybe that is exactly what FIFA wanted. A bigger world, a bigger stage, a bigger story. The World Cup is no longer just a tournament for the usual powers with a few brave outsiders. It is becoming a global football festival where more nations can say, "We were there. We had a chance. We made people nervous." And honestly, that part is hard to hate. Football history is not only built by champions, it is built by the team nobody expected, the goalkeeper who becomes a national hero, the underdog who survives one more round, the favorite who suddenly looks terrified. The new format gives us more of those moments, but it also creates a dangerous side effect. It makes the tournament harder to understand at first glance, and that matters more than people admit. A great World Cup format should not need a calculator, a flowchart, and 3 nervous friends texting each other at the same time. When fans need to ask, wait, who can still qualify? Every 5 minutes the drama can be fun, but it can also become exhausting. The bracket is where this becomes even more obvious. Winning a group used to feel like a clear reward. You finished first, you avoided certain dangers, and you had the feeling that the tournament had respected your work. Now, with more teams and more possible combinations, the path can feel stranger. A team can dominate its group and still find itself in a brutal route. Another team can barely survive and suddenly land on a more comfortable path. One goal in one group can reshape what happens somewhere else. This does not mean the format is unfair, but it does mean the World Cup now feels less like a straight road and more like a maze. And mazes are exciting, until your team is trapped inside one. This is the real question. Is the new World Cup format actually better? Or is it just bigger? Because bigger is not automatically better. Bigger can mean more inclusion, more dreams, more stories, more fans, more countries watching with their hearts on the line. But bigger can also mean more confusion, more uneven games, more complicated rules, and a tournament that takes longer to reach its most intense version. The old 32-team World Cup had a kind of balance. It was big enough to feel global, but small enough to feel elite. It had room for surprises, but not too much room. It was clean, it was familiar, it had rhythm. The 2026 version is something else. It is louder, more generous, more chaotic, more global, more confusing, maybe less pure, maybe more fun. And that is the real debate. Is the World Cup supposed to be the cleanest test to the best teams? Or is it supposed to be the biggest football story on earth? Because those are not always the same thing. The cleanest tournament might be smaller. The biggest story might be messier. And 2026 clearly chose the bigger story. That is why this format feels so strange. It is not just a sporting decision. It is a philosophical one. It asks what we actually want from the World Cup. Do we want the strongest teams protected? Do we want more countries included? Do we want fewer meaningless games? Do we want more knockout drama? Do we want simplicity? Or do we secretly enjoy the madness? Right now, the new World Cup format feels like someone opened the doors of football's biggest palace and let everybody run inside at once. Some people are dancing. Some people are lost. Some people are arguing with the map. And somewhere in the middle of all that, the trophy is still waiting. Maybe the best thing about this format is that it gives us stories we would never have had before. Maybe the worst thing is that it makes the road to the trophy feel less elegant than it used to. But one thing is clear. The World Cup has changed. Not just in size, not just in numbers, not just on paper, it has changed in feeling. The group stage no longer feels like a simple filter. The knockout stage no longer begins where it used to. Third place no longer means failure. And survival can now look almost as important as dominance. That is why this tournament feels chaotic, because the old rules of World Cup emotion have been rewritten. By the time a champion finally lifts the trophy, we may still be arguing about whether this format saved the World Cup, ruined it, or simply turned it into the wildest version of itself. Maybe this is the future. Maybe it is too much. But if football has taught us anything, it is this. Chaos does not always make the game worse. Sometimes chaos is exactly where the World Cup becomes unforgettable.